just about 8 o'clock, and it's time for the Pastor's Chat. Father Rob Arsenault, joining you from Annunciation of the Lord Parish here in Ottawa, Canada. It's actually, I'm not supposed to be here. Long story. You might hear it in my voice. I got a bit of a cold. I think I picked it up from Father John. He was over in Rome, and often when you travel, you pick up head colds. And God bless John. He came back and he preached on the weekend, but I think I picked it up. And so it's one of those things, I'm almost over it. But the notion of going out tonight, I just didn't have the energy, and it's just still a bit feverish. I don't want to give this to anybody else. Well, where would I be going out to? Well, what's going on tonight is a movie premiere, pretty much. Now, we've had a few showings of this, but this is the first big night. It's the 4th of June. And over at the Museum of Civilization, Companions of the Cross are showing Father Bob's movie. It's kind of interesting. It's a movie they've been working on for the last, about a year or two. I think they've been kind of chucking away at it. And it's a movie about his life and times. And we kind of timed it so that it came out here on the 40th anniversary of the founding of the community, the Companions of the Cross. And with that happening, I think Father Brian and I were talking earlier today. He's on the panel. They're going to have the showing of the movie, and then they'll have like a panel discussion. I think Father Roger, who was one of the originals, Bishop Scott, I think, is going to be there as well. Who's kind of one of the friends of Father Bob, and he certainly, I think he feels his priesthood is very much formed by him. And Father Brian, who kind of was inspired by him as well. I think he was a young man growing up in the parish of St. Mary's, and again inspired by Bob. So they'll have the showing of the movie, and then they'll have this panel discussion of people who actually knew Father Bob. So excuse me, that's why I'm not there. So what's the story of Father Bob? Well, he's a very interesting guy. Some of you may know him, some of you may not. We often quote him. He was from Ottawa. He's a single child. He was only child. He was a great hockey fan all his life, good athlete. He went through seminary. He really wasn't all that interested in revival. Sometimes I think his nickname was Sleepy Bob. I think he was one of my first pastors, Justin Hanley, Father Justin. He was a classmate of his, and that's what they described him. He didn't get into renewal or anything. He got into teaching very quickly after he was ordained, and he taught at Pius X for a very long time. Was a principal there for a time and a basketball coach. And this is kind of his track. He was probably on track to finish that. He would have retired probably in his 60s and then maybe helped out around, and that's where it was going. A very tragic thing occurred. It was in the early or mid 80s. This actually was reported on CNN. The movie release, that is, and they got the dates wrong. They said in the 70s, but I'm pretty sure it's the 80s. I think it was 87. There was a shooting. It took place at Pius X, very tragic, and it was in Father Bob's class. And the young man, unfortunately, took several lives, and then his own, and right in front of Father Bob. And it was, of course, very traumatic. And at the time, the wisdom was, well, get him back on the horse. And so they came in, they cleaned up the room, and the next day they were back in class. And it seems a little crazy today, but back then, that's what they thought was the best thing. And so there's a process with Father Bob and his canonization. We're just very in the early stages of that, consideration for that. If he ever did become a saint, that'd be a great thing for our community, but I think he'd be probably the patron saint of PST, post-traumatic stress, I think, PST. It really did affect him. But what it did do also was to free him up, in a sense. He went back he finished that year and just really needed some time. He just was just almost like a burnout. So the bishop gave him a year off. And now Bob was already, at that point, had his conversion. He was now a charismatic. He was very into the Marian movement. He had been to Medjugorje very, very early, like when he stayed in people's houses, like before, it became as popular as it is now. And through all of that, he'd come to a place of kind of expectation. He was going to a place called Steubenville in Ohio. He was friends with Jake Randall and Michael Scanlon, and this whole circle of charismatic priests from the 70s and early 80s that were starting to see a sense of revival, and almost in a sense of vision that Bob had would be that a church explosively alive. See, just imagine that the church that he'd seen, that he'd grown up in, it was kind of in decline, and the state of affairs didn't seem to be changing very much. And this is the 80s. Remember, the 80s, churches were full, and I don't know, like, it was the end of Christendom. There was still necessarily lots of sports on Sunday. No, Sunday was for church, and you didn't say which church you went to, but you went somewhere. And secularism didn't have quite the hold that it does now. But Bob was already saying, look, if we don't do something significant, we're going to lose it all. And then he went on this circuit for a year, and he just kept talking about a revived church, a renewed church, Catholic church. Now, evangelical world, this is kind of what they do, but in the Catholic faith, it wasn't really seen in the same way. And this is why guys like Jake Randall and Michael Scanlon and other priests that were already kind of pioneering this. So at the end of that year, they said, well, the bishop said, well, we'd like to put you in a parish. I don't think you can go back to teaching. Would you be willing to do that? And that's when he was assigned to St. Mary's. Now, St. Mary's, I guess the local parishioners might not like this description, but Bob said there was nothing going on. The only thing happening in the parish was Girl Guides. Literally, he said he could fire a snowball down the middle of the aisle and no damage done. There was just nothing happening. Very few people attending, very little devotion, certainly no outreach, not even maintenance. Now, what happened after was a fairly quick succession of change. Of course, Bob's very popular. He knew a lot of young people through Pius X. He knew people through the Charismatic movement. He knew people through the Marian movement. He was an excellent speaker. He was an English teacher, kind of easy. So he loved words and he had a dry wit. He was very quite funny, and yet was fearless. He put out a solid message. So people came to hear Father Bob, right? Father Bob in a parish. Wow, what's that look like? And instantly there was more people, like double, triple what there was. And then people started to go because people were going. Like that's sort of a funny thing, but said, oh, St. Mary's is it's coming alive. And then people said, oh, what's that about? And they would go. And then other people went because they thought it was nonsense, or this is silly, or this is not what Catholics do. And they almost went to disprove it, and yet found something powerful happening there. And there was conversions, and there was healings, and there was prophetic senses, and there was a church explosively alive. I remember, I think I was a seminarian. I did go there one Sunday. It was a very, it's hard to describe. It wasn't a great part of my life. I wasn't even sure if I was going to continue. I was going through my own vocation. I didn't really know Father Bob. I went with Father Jim McGilvery, was a mentor of mine, but he was friends with Bob. So that's kind of my connection. So I went there one Sunday, and I remember thinking, I don't know if I really want to be a priest, but if I could be a priest like this, that might work. And what happened then was a whole group of guys started showing up, and this sort of revival of vocations. Vocations weren't doing very well in the late 80s. And suddenly you had 12, 13, 15 young men discerning priesthood. And there's a little bit of a side tick there. It'd be interesting if Bob had stayed at St. Mary's and just continued that work of renewal. There are some priests that have been doing that for a long time, and that's kind of the course they took. For Bob, he kind of got a little sidetracked. He said, okay, I'll step away from the parish a little bit, and I'll get more involved in the community, but the community then will multiply. This is a big word we've been using lately. Then we'll have many St. Mary's. That was pretty ambitious, but nonetheless felt, spirit-led, and let's go. So he spoke with the bishop. Bishop sort of allowed it, step one, step two. What's interesting in that story is that he went to see, I think Bishop Plouffe at the time, and he really expected to get thrown out of his office. He didn't think this was going anywhere. But of course, all the young guys said, oh, you go, Bob, you tell him, you'll explain it to him. It's like, oh, great, it has to be me. It's quite funny when he tells the story. But when he went in, he was very surprised at just the receptivity of Bishop Plouffe. In fact, Bishop Plouffe at the end said, Father Bob, that's not your vision, it's mine. He too had seen many of the same trends, and he too was just worried about the future of the church after the end of Christendom. So he gave Bob carte blanche. He said, yes, let's go ahead. Let's try this. Let's see if this thing goes. To his amazement, I think Bob was really hoping he'd say no, and then it'd be over, and then somebody else can do this. But it's not how it happened. So I wish I could tell you it's all easy sailing from there. The community's, in 40 years, there's been some challenges. We had a huge number of seminarians, many of whom left. I think we've had over 350 in the system, something like that. It's a lot. We've made some attempts to expand some places. We've had to, more or less we've covered the same territory, but it's been difficult and not always easy and not glory to glory. And we haven't had St. Mary's after St. Mary's after St. Mary's. But I think in time, I think we're starting to see the same things here in Annunciation as Father Eve started this. And now in my time. And that was part of why we did it, what we did. You see, it takes about 15 to 20 years to bring a parish to renewal, but no one priest stays there that long. And so my hope would be, as Father Eve had set some things in place, and then I was able to build on Father Eve, when I leave, the priest who replaces me will build on what I've done, which was built on Father Eve did. And hopefully by that time, we really are getting to a place where we too, like St. Mary's, can start to contribute to other places and other things. And that's all kind of attributed to Father Bob. He had the vision. I think he was human. Like, I think we put him up on a pedestal. We're all so young. Like, we just thought, well, Bob knows everything. Bob can do everything. Well, I think we pushed him pretty hard. And maybe that was too much. I don't know. It's hard to say. It was what it was. But, it's not going to be a problem. Like, I think this is, I think after 40 years, we've gotten to a place of maturity where we can kind of move on. So question, Sophia, I was wondering if anyone was going to pick up on that. I am not leaving. I'm not leaving. Well, I'm not leaving now. I mean, obviously I'm staying around for the next few years as we have 2 new young priests coming, but eventually I do have to leave. Like, that's the whole point. Nobody's irreplaceable. So, I'll move the parish, hopefully, for a few more years, the way it needs to go. And then someone will have to pick it up after me, and someone will have to pick it up after that. This is going to take years and generations to bring about renewal. It's no magic easy formula. I'm just happy that I could be a part of it and be a little piece of it. So sorry I couldn't be at the movie. That's probably as left for me to say tonight. But here's the thing. I'm gonna ask Father Roger. I know that some of the other foundations have had screenings in their own parish. I know St. Benedict's did that. I think there might be a plan to do it in Toronto. But I'm going to do it here. I'm going to ask at least to see if we can't show the movie here. So we'll pick like a Friday night or a Saturday, maybe a Saturday night, and we'll just show the movie and then maybe have the same thing, a little discussion panel afterwards for people to see it. Now, there's no car chases. There's no, I don't think there's any helicopter scenes or anything like that. It's a fairly basic. It's telling a story. It's extremely expensive to make movies. What's made a difference now is it's the cameras are so much better. It's so much cheaper. But the editing takes forever to get these things done. So I've only seen bits of the rough cut. But let's see if I can't get a screening here at Annunciation, and you guys can come and see what you think. Father Bob, the movie. So my good friends, there it is. So I'm sorry I didn't make the premiere tonight. I didn't walk on the red carpet. But I do want to ask Father Bob's intervention for us, and let's pray for all those who suffer traumatic things in this world. Let's pray for healing. Let's pray for guidance. And let's see what the next 40 years brings as God continues to renew his people. May the good Lord continue to watch over you. May the saints and angels intercede for you. May our Blessed Mother wrap you in the mantle of her peace. In the name of the Father,